Welcome back to the topic variations, and we continue with the fourth part, that is the partial variations. Now, partial variations involves more than two variables in a split, that is related in an addition or a subtraction split. For example, the equation y equals k1x plus k2z, where k1 and k2s are constants, it means that y has been split into y equals k1x and y equals k2z. So that is a partial because it is partial k1x and another part k2x. So in a question you will find the word partial or part. Alright. That means therefore, if you look at the first part, we can say y is directly proportional to x. If you look at the second part, we can say y is directly proportional to z. So these are now stated as y varies partly as x and z. That it is partly x and partly z. So these are some of the expressions that you will find when dealing with calculations involving partial variation. A variable y varies partly as x and partly as the square of z. What does that mean? That means y is partly varies directly as x and partly varies directly as z squared. That's why I've said y varies as x and z squared. Therefore, introducing constants, now we say y equals k1x and k2z squared. Look at this one. Y is partly constant. So one part of y is a constant and the other part varies as x. So y varies constantly and as x. So we are going to write it as y equals, there is no introduction of a constant because it's already a constant, but we introduce a constant in this next variable. So let's look at an expression 3. Y varies partly as x and as the inverse and inversely. And let's remove the as x and as inversely as z. So y varies directly as x and inversely as z. So when we introduce constants, we are going to have y equals k1x plus k2 over z. That means each part has its own constant of proportion. Alright, so note, partial variation has a constant of proportionality for each part. Each part, that's what I have said here. Each part has a constant. Like this one has its own constant, and this one has its own constant. Each is split, or each part. Now, we're going to look at an example. Y varies partly as x and partly as the square of x. What does that mean? Here, that y varies partly as x and partly as the square of x. So if we introduce constants for each part, then we will say, therefore y is equals to the first constant, which we call k1, and the second constant for the second part. Alright? So if we were to introduce now, given that, now we go back to the question, when x is 2, y is 14, and when x is 5, y is 65. So we need to substitute, but we'll continue in the next clip.